Star Wars 7x7 episode 2836. It's Saturday, which usually means it's a What to Watch Now episode of the podcast, and that's actually what it's going to be today. And we are going to continue our series of looks at Industrial Light and Magic videos, this time related to Solo: A Star Wars Story. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, as you may recall from previous episodes, I went through the Industrial Light and Magic YouTube account and found all the videos that are specific to Star Wars. There's a whole bunch because they do a lot for other films and franchises too. But I pulled all the Star Wars ones and put them in a playlist for you, and I'll link that playlist in the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com and in the show notes as well. But those videos that are on there, we've been talking about them in chunks over the last couple of episodes of the What to Watch Now business. We talked about Rogue One previously, we talked about The Last Jedi previously, now we're going to talk about the ones for Solo: A Star Wars Story. Then these ones are unusual in that they are not for promoting Solo: A Star Wars Story for the Academy Awards. So as we talked about last time, there were little icons on the Rogue One and Last Jedi ones where they were saying, you know, for your consideration, and it was for visual effects stuff for nominating those two movies. Not so the case with Solo: A Star Wars Story. So these videos were released in November and December of 2018, and then the last one was released in January of 2019, but none of them are about the Oscar situation. And so I went back and looked, and there is a nomination for Solo: A Star Wars Story for visual effects. Unfortunately, they lost to First Man, but yeah, it was just the one nomination, and I guess maybe they just weren't going to make a push for it, and maybe it had to do with all the foofara that happened around Solo leading up to getting it released. I don't know what the deal was necessarily, but yeah, unfortunately they didn't make a big Oscar push, and I guess it ultimately didn't matter because they didn't win it anyway. So there were 5 videos in total. 3 of them are behind the magic videos, that's how they're labeled, and they're less than a minute long. And then there are 2 Ilm Spotlight videos, which are each a couple of minutes long. Those ones I think are really the gems of the 5. The behind the magic ones actually don't have as much of the magic, if you will, as the previous ones for Rogue One and for The Last Jedi had. For example, there's one for the speeder chase, and that's the speeder chase where Han and Kira are trying to get to the spaceport on Corellia. There's a moment that they show where you see elements of Coronet City being dropped in, which is cool, and you see Han and Kira running along that bridge, and you see how they drop in all the environment that they're running around, and you know, that's cool. But I think the best moment of it is that you see when they're in their speeder and they kind of double back and drift around onto another route to the spaceport, and all the bad guys following them have to do the same thing. So they do a wipe where they show 2 cars actually performing this maneuver on a racetrack, and it's so awesome, and I would have loved to see that whole situation, but it's just like a brief second and it's gone. So yeah, that's one where it was just kind of lacking in terms of actually showing the quote-unquote magic, if you will. And the Kessel Run one has even less of that. Like, I did not see, like after watching it a couple of times, very little in terms of the way that some of these other videos happen, where they show different elements and they're showing how they add in all of the effects I mean, the visual effects thing is just so complicated and amazing what they can do now, and it happens at so many layers that it's so remarkable. And when they show you all of that, it's fantastic, but they really didn't show a lot of layers of how they built up the environment of the Kessel Run for that particular video. So that was unfortunately a little disappointing. And then there was one for the Train Heist, which I think was probably more on a par with the speeder chase one, because yeah, you got to see something of a base layer, if you will, of range troopers on the train and firing at our heroes. And then there's actually a good extended bit with the coaxium explosion, and you get to see different variations on that and different stages of the explosion, and it is really neat looking. Like, it looks like a giant water bubble basically, and how they ended up making that happen on a grand scale and taking out pieces of the mountain, and how they layer in that that transport hauler over the scene. Like, that's very cool too. But it's also real quick, and they don't give you a lot in that one. So the Spotlight ones definitely were better, and there are 2 Spotlight videos. One of them is about the Millennium Falcon, and one of them is about L337. So the Falcon one, they talk about, and there are interviews with multiple people in both of these, so that's really terrific. And one of the things that they talked about in the Millennium Falcon one is how, as much as the movie Solo is an origin story of sorts for Han Solo, it's also an origin story for the Millennium Falcon. And so they talk about how they redesigned the Falcon for Lando to make it representative of Lando, and then how they use the whole Kessel Run sequence to basically beat it up to create Han's Falcon. And something new that I learned from this, and maybe you already knew this, so good on you if you did, there's an entirely different radar dish on Lando's Falcon, and an entirely different gun instead of the quad turret gun that we're used to with Han's Falcon. Those are different in Lando's Falcon, and I did not realize that, and they call that out as part of what they're showing you in this video, and it's really kind of startling. And it ends with that moment of the Falcon laying on Savareen, it just completely beat up, and Han coming over to Lando and saying, oh, you know, she's a heck of a ship, and Lando just looking at him, and they cut it before he could say, I hate you, but you know, that's okay. It really is about Han and how excited he is about that ship, that's to be sure. And the one for L3, well, that one is also fascinating because you get to see Phoebe Waller-Bridge and how they created L3, and she's wearing like a hat and things down the outsides of her arms, and a chest plate and a back plate, and then legs basically, like she's got these pieces that are attached to the outside of her legs, and otherwise it's a green motion capture suit. So it's just, you know, this form-fitting green bodysuit, and that's what they had on set. So you get to see her walking around with this, and then they show you scenes of the visual effects and how they replaced her with the actual, you know, CGI of L3. One of the interviews is also with this external company, Hybrid, which is spelled with an E at the end. And they talk about how they did it and how they were doing their best to make sure that they captured the set lighting and everything else from the on-set performance of Phoebe Waller-Bridge and make it as lifelike as possible. If I heard the phrase right, the gentleman talked about matching the life plate, which was, if that's the right term, that's a new term I'd never heard before. I'm like, wow, matching the life plate as closely as possible? Like, that sounds really intense and fascinating. And again, as they showed how they replaced Phoebe Waller-Bridge with the CGI L3, you also get to see moments of Phoebe Waller-Bridge performing on set. So you get to see her like charging out of the mines of Kessel and yelling, ah, you know, cheering on the droid revolution and whatnot. And so that is really fun too. So I definitely think those 2 Spotlight videos about the Falcon and about L3 are worth your time. The Kessel Run and the Speeder Chase and the, oh, what was the other one? Gosh, the Train Heist, that's the one. Those ones, I mean, you know, if you're a completist, they're less than a minute, so you'll get through them real quick. I don't think you'll necessarily learn anything new or fascinating on those 3, but, you know, they're there for you. They are in that playlist that I made for you for all of the ILM Star Wars videos. And again, I'll link that at the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com and in the show notes as well, so you can check it out at your leisure. And that right there is going to do it for today's episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.